It's a great pleasure to welcome Dr. Teresa Alcoverro to this Let's Talk Climate Change conversation series. Teresa is one of the world's best-known marine ecologists. She works, we have this very wide-ranging conversation. She talks about her work in Spain, in the Mediterranean landscapes, in India, in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and in Lakshadweep. What it is to be one of the senior women working in this area, how climate grief has changed her, what she thinks of the future as a mother, as a woman working in the field, and also her own research working on seagrasses, how that evolved from that to looking, at core ecology, going all the way to climate change, and then looking forward to social ecological systems and trying to shape things ahead. And finally, what is our hope for a better world? So join us in this very fascinating, wide-ranging conversations. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure. I'm actually very happy to be here as well. And I think, I guess that we often tend not to want to be exposed so much. And I think that actually it's good that women, and particularly women of our age, start to be also more present in these dialogues. And I'm really happy to be here, really.
That's very nice. So we'll start with something I usually tend to start with, which is how did your journey into conservation come? You grew up, I know, in a more rural setting, but then you moved to Barcelona. But do you think you were a nature lover from a child or drawn to the coast?
No, actually, I was a village child from a village, rural village, as rural as you can be in Spain. So I was not a person that would, just to give you an example, I think I saw the sea when I was 10 years old or something like that.
That's it?
Yeah, because, no, probably before, but I saw the sea of Barcelona, which I would call, the harbor of Barcelona. But actually my first experience with the sea were very late. I was not actually thinking on doing nature. What I wanted to do at that age, when I was young, is to have adventures. I wanted to travel. So then I thought, okay, maybe something like being a journalist. I had an uncle who is a journalist and he was traveling all over the world. So for me, that was like my dream. Then when I was closer to study, etc., I had the opportunity to spend one summer. That's a very nice opportunity. They talk about, they call working summer or something like that, in which you actually go to a place and then you have the possibility to participate working with them. And
How old?
I was 17.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I went there.
After high school?
Yeah. I was still in high school. It was 1 year more. And I went there and I went to the Ebro's Delta. This is an area, it's a delta of a river, but it's in the coast, of course. And then it's an area which has a lot of birds, etc. And there, what we were doing is just be very close to nature. I was just taking care of birds nesting in some beaches, etc. But I was with biologists there. So that experience has changed my vision of what I wanted to do. I just realized that I just loved to be in nature, that it was something that I was not, because I didn't have the opportunity. My parents never thought that going to a walk in the forest or whatever was something to do. Forest was the fields. It was going to so for me it was very new, no? This type of approach to nature like that. And I think that there is where I just thought, okay, maybe doing something related to that. And actually, I applied biology. At the end, I just decided to do it. So it was completely one chance. I could have taken a work on, archaeology, which were also options. And now I would be an archaeologist. I don't know.
So, which is interesting, I think, for me personally, very gratifying, because I often feel as an ecologist, a little... when people ask me, how did you come to ecology? I feel a little uncertain because most people that I know came to ecology because they were nature lovers when they were very young, bird watching, into the field, into the forest, trekking. I didn't come like that. I came because I'm a microbiologist by undergraduate training and I hated the lab, and I happened to hear my then PhD advisor talking about the importance of doing this kind of science for India's environment and dealing with local problems. And so I came in, it's completely by accident, completely sideways. And then I think about how quickly, unlikely that particular path was. So it's good to know about this.
Yeah.
But also makes me think we should probably be giving more children the opportunity to expose them to these kinds of paths, right?
Absolutely. And I guess, I mean, we now and our kids have this privilege of having been, I mean, being a naturalist. Of course, there are kids which are absolutely, even if they come from probably rural areas, they may have this approach. But there are lots of kids that actually don't even have this way of being in contact with the nature in this way. I mean, particularly rural kids, nature, it's always something which you go to work.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, I remember my father, that I was actually, I say that, but my brother, my youngest brother, he loved to go for excursions. And when I was a kid, he will take me with him.
Okay.
So in the area in which I am, that there are very nice mountains, etc., I will go. And my father will ask me all the time, why you are going there? What is lost there? Because there is this sense that there, I mean, first of all, there were wolves. It was not anymore, but it was a place where it was not a place for people, So yeah, I guess that this approach of nature comes, it's very new and it comes with being in contact in a different way. And
and you have to push family. Again, I'm thinking because when I started my PhD, then I moved to ecology. My mother was very scared because, and my first fieldwork experience was not in a distant forest. It was very much in a semi-agricultural landscape. So I stayed with the family. I went with field assistants. It was as safe as you can get. But she was terrified. She thought I was choosing this wild profession. And I had an uncle who was also a professor in the university where I did my PhD. And he knew someone who was a professor in the same university who did his PhD on elephant dung. So he would joke all the time, oh, she's become an ecologist. She's going to collect elephant dung all her life, which is a very dismissive way of saying she's going to become a dung collector. And so now I'm thinking, I forgot all about those things. But
no, that's very sweet. And I think that, I mean, I was also lucky for another thing, which is, again, something that I think that here also happens, and is that what the parents' expectations are. And nobody as parents will have an expectation of a daughter being a marine biologist or an ecologist.
Right.
I mean, you have to be a doctor, or you have to be
an
lawyer,
engineer,
or an engineer, all the thing. I was lucky because I was the youngest of many, many, many brothers. And I have a brother who is a doctor, I have a brother who is a lawyer, I have a brother who is an engineer, I have my sister who is a teacher. So when I arrived there, they were out of professions. So when I say I want to be biology, my father said, yeah, do whatever you want. And I guess that being the youngest also helped me to just be more free to decide what I wanted. I didn't have any pressure.
Which is true. I'm also the youngest. I mean, only of two, but my sister is 11 years older. And she had a lot of pressure, which I didn't. She wanted to do pure maths and she was asked to become an accountant because it was a good, safe career path. But you're right. By the time I arrived, there were other things they had to do and they weren't paying that much attention, which is a good thing.
Yeah. And I always thought that the good thing I had as a youngest is that actually they just were tired of educating kids and they say, okay, do whatever you want.
But then, so you joined biology as your undergraduate program. And as you say, your cohort of, we were talking about this before, the cohort of friends are now doing some very interesting things like the revitalization of Barcelona city from an ecological perspective or so many other kinds of things, right? So what do you think made that cohort special?
Look, we always, I mean, when I studied at the university, we were not at all the best students. We spent a lot of time in the bar, not just playing cards as other groups were. We were just discussing and talking, and we wanted to change the world at that stage. But we actually were not really the best of the class, the ones getting the best marks, etc., etc. We were a bit of a peculiar group, no? I wouldn't say, I mean, we were just a group of friends. And what is surprising is we were a group, we are still very good friends after 35 years of after we finished the university, no? So we are still very, very good friends. And the amazing thing is that there are, among this group, like 4 or 5 of us are researchers with good careers in research. Others are doing amazing things in education, in planning of cities, and many, 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 many things. So always when we meet and we say, how that happened? And I think I always think that we just influence each other a lot. So if you have friends, because often we think, what is the thing that will influence you the most? No, the parents, the education, etc. I think that in certain periods, the people who most influence you are your friends. And the way we just wanted to actually discover and find new, and we just were absolutely fascinated by research, etc. We were just not afraid, and we just jumped without thinking, okay, we want to make money, etc. No, that was not in any of my friends' agenda at that point. No, so yeah, we were very free, and also we had one teacher, which was a very peculiar teacher, I would say. But at that point, he just took us to the field. We spent 10 days in the north of Spain, and each of us was supposed to work on a group. I was working on algae at that time, just by chance, because at that point I was not even thinking of marine ecology, and in some insects. Each one had the group, no? And then we will be collecting and getting data, etc. It was like our first field true experience. We were only in our second year at the university. Yeah. From that, I think all of us wanted to do research. It was like, that's the best. I mean,
so good teacher and a good group of friends.
Yeah. As simple as that. And and still good friends.
And still good friends.
Just,
fantastic.
And amazing.
And all of you have stayed with the idea of doing ecology or conservation in some sense.
Yeah, somehow. No, but not all. Because some of them work some of them work more on molecular biology, on medical things. No.
So how did then you come to ecology? I mean, how did you stay with ecology? And why marine?
I think it was probably because of this lack of having a clear, I was not a botanist. I was not a zoologist, as a lot of some of my colleagues, which were I was a bit interested in everything. So I thought, okay, ecology actually, and I started to do some classes on ecology. I come from the Department of Ecology of the University of Barcelona, who was head at that time, or the person that was there and still there, was Ramon Margalef. So Ramon Margalef was such an important person there, which probably was the most important researcher we had at the university. So being at the Department of Ecology was like a dream. And he was not teaching anymore too much. He was giving some lectures, etc.
Did he interact much with students?
But he interacted in some classes, etc. He was always interacting. It was an amazing person. It was one of these people that will always be interested, even if you were saying a stupidity. I remember one day asking him something completely out of place because I don't know, I wanted just to talk and I realized it. He would take your question and just move it and take it into a direction which was super interesting, no? So it was a very, I mean, even though it was on his wall, because it was a very particular person, so he will be just writing in a small board, small things, thinking he will bring some references from a Russian thing and whatever. He had an incredible memory. But, I don't know, is one of the most loved people, researchers, professors that we have at the university. Everybody he was extremely generous. He did almost not publish a paper with any of his students. Just to give you a sense of the person he was. He would just give them what he thought. Okay, I need to train people because they have to be the future. The pure professor, as you would expect, no? So he was an amazing person.
And then, so what was your first marine? Was it in your master's? Was it in your PhD?
No, it was actually during the university as well.
Okay.
At the University of Barcelona, at that time, we had this field again, no? They will take you to the field. At that time, I think we went, I don't think I had yet the diving course. So I went to that course and there I interacted already with all the professors at the department that were really, an amazing group. And there is where I started to say, okay, that's what I want to do. I mean, it was like, for me, it was like, it was the adventure part of it that I wanted to do at the beginning. I guess that came because I thought that's something I want to do. Yeah, I liked the sea a lot. Yeah, it was a place I was feeling comfortable. And yeah, I don't know. And good professors. I had 2 very good professors in marine ecology, Professor Javier Romero and Professor Miquel Zavala, which I just admired a lot. And yeah, I guess that was how I jumped into marine ecology.
So I think to me, you're unusual. Marine ecology is not a field I know very well, but I would still say to me that the fact that you work in the Mediterranean, you work in the Andamans, you work in the, so Indian Ocean, Arabian Sea, Lakshadweep, it's not usual. And you also did your work, you obviously worked a lot in Spain and continue to do, but you also did research and study in India, in South Africa, in the US, which is again unusual if you think of it. So what, was it the travel instinct?
I guess, okay. I would
you looked for those fellowships in different places?
Yeah, I guess that I would never, if I was trying to pretend to be a person I am not, I would say, no, I have been, because I went to a very good university in the US. So I went to Stanford. So it was not as though the university was not. But I guess that for me, the thing that moves me the most is this spirit of adventure that has been always there. So I wanted to go to the US, yes, but I wanted to go to a place which I really like it. So then California and this coast in particular, which was an amazing place. I had the opportunity to go before, so I thought that is where I want to go. And it happened to be Stanford. Of course, I could be saying, oh no, I wanted to go with these professors, etc., but I will be lying.
Yeah. No, but you're not compromising on the research to do the adventure. You're finding a place where the two link together.
Exactly. Yeah. And when I was, actually for me, the true adventures is when I went to Africa. It was actually not to South Africa, it was to Kenya.
Ah, okay.
It was to Kenya. It's okay. But there, I went to Kenya because I thought that, okay, I wanted to go to a place which was tropical. I had not been in any tropical sea before because, of course, again, I didn't have the opportunity to travel or to go to these places. So I thought, okay, I will ask for a postdoc to go there. And I looked for a good researcher there, which was Tim McClanahan, which was an American, which actually was working there. But imagine that when I asked for that grant, I was the first person to ask for a grant in Africa. There was not precedence of students that had asked for a grant. Everybody was going to America, Australia, other places in Europe. Who the hell wants to go to Africa, no? As a postdoc, no? So for me, it was like a new, it was an experience. They didn't know even what to pay me because there was not a precedent, no? So it was a very peculiar, it was a choice which was not, it was a bit atypical, but was among the best things that could happen to me. There, I think it was more important, my postdoc in Kenya than probably my postdoc in Africa.
In Stanford.
Because, in Stanford. Because there, I actually had the opportunity, to know ecosystems, to see things that I've not seen, to develop myself quite alone for the first time, and to develop my research, and to have no economical support to do it. So you have to be very creative. I had to think how I'm going to construct. I was very experimental based. I did a lot of experiments underwater, etc. No? So there I had to think how to do it without things, etc. So you develop a lot of things, and there,
without any instruments, equipment that you take for granted,
nothing. So you have to be very, very good at actually thinking how to do research, no? And there is where actually probably my true passion came, and I started with seagrasses. That was my ecology. Most of my research had been done in seagrasses, in marine plants. Those are plants that are not algae, that they have flowers and fruits and are underwater. And most of my work was on trying to understand the functioning of these systems, no? But there, is where I discovered, and if you look at any book, even now, you will say these plants are mainly ecosystems which are functioning through the bottom-up processes. It means that mainly nutrients and light are the main factors limiting their production, their distribution, etc., etc. Herbivores are not very important, no? When I was doing my PhD, I already saw that there were a lot of fish herbivores there. But okay, at that time, I thought that what the books were saying
was true.
So, but it was already quite shocking for me. But when I went to Kenya, I just realized that that was actually not true at all. There were lots and lots of herbivores, and they were actually shaping the ecosystem. So yeah, from then I started to work with the herbivores, no? Which is probably one of the main topics I have been working with.
So I wanted to ask then, because I know your first daughter was already born by then.
Was born actually after,
Just after.
After that, after that trip.
But so you are a mother of two daughters, two young women, and with their own very diverse and very important talents. And at the same time, they're also facing the uncertainties of the world in front of us, right? Which is a world with economic collapse, with the threat of maybe regional war on us, with climate change,
particularly now,
with all kinds of things. We just went through the pandemic, and the pandemic was so hard for young people across the world. I mean, as a parent of a young daughter myself, and young women, right? Because we know in some ways, times for young women have become easier now, but in some ways they've become much harder now. And in a variety of ways. And so where do you feel, looking at, because there's one thing I wonder, there are very few people, very few women of our age in conservation or in climate change, or not nearly as many as there should be. There are many more younger women coming in. But if you look at the world now that you're leaving behind, because I see that it's not just for the purpose of representation. I think there is something about gender apart from being very black and white about it, but that shapes a particular view. And especially as a mother, what do you feel about climate change and the world ahead, and what are your fears and hopes for the world ahead?
Well, one thing I can feel it personally, and another as a mother. And I mean, if personally I feel it, and I feel it that sometimes I think this is too much, and I guess that it happened to all of us, and particularly if you work on marine ecosystems and the type of ecosystems I work, like coral reefs and seagrasses, but coral reefs in particular, I have seen in my age a loss of more than 60%, 50% of the corals. That is unbearable. I mean, it creates you some sort of depression. It really, I guess that all of us, in particular, the ones which have this, that have seen this decrease in the ecosystems, have gone through some kind of, I would call it depression, because the ecosystems, whatever you are studying, I am studying herbivory, whatever. At a certain point, you look at them and you say, I cannot be looking at the ecosystems anymore as though I am interested in the functioning. I mean, something
is collapsing around you.
Large is happening that you just have to say, okay, let's start to do something else, no? But in my case, I had to go through it, and I had to somehow find a way to personally try to get out, because otherwise it was too much, no? And I think all of us have gone through a period which is similar, with a bit of more distance. And I have this capacity now to be a bit distant. This year we had an El Niño event. We know that all the corals are dead. Last year it was extraordinary. There was a lot of increase in coral after a few years. We know that now we are going to go there and it will be all dead. You have to have a bit of distance, otherwise it will not be possible.
Otherwise you go mad with the grief.
You get mad. But when it comes to my daughters, there the distance is not possible. And I just get mad. I mean, when it comes to climate change, it's just something, I just think that it's so unfair. I mean, and sometimes, particularly with the people who don't believe it, or the people who don't give a damn. I just think, do they have children?
Yeah.
Do they actually have children? Do they actually care about their children? Because if they care about their children, how they actually can ignore something as big, no? So as a mother, I'm terrorized. But say that again, cannot transfer that to them.
That's the hard part, because you can't.
Otherwise,
if you talk about all of this to them, they get consumed with grief. I mean, consumed with anxiety.
Exactly. And I realized, I don't know if it happened to you during the pandemic, no? During the pandemic at home, at the beginning, it was like we were also, trapped by it, that we were looking at the news every day and just sharing with them, etc. at home, just showing them, etc. At a certain point, we just realized that they were getting extremely depressed and that they were facing a problem. At home, during the pandemic, we decided at a certain point not to watch the television.
Yeah.
It was a survival mechanism.
I think so.
Because otherwise my kids were not going to, I thought that they will not go through all the process, no? So, so sometimes, what I'm doing, somehow, I try not to transfer this as much. But of course.
But I see the anger. I completely get it.
But I am upset.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean. So as a researcher, somehow I'm coping with it because I have to. But as a mother and as a human being, I'm extremely upset.
And I think all of us are coping with it by shutting it out in some sense. And I don't know how long or when we can shut it out. What happens when we stop?
It's just, it's when you have something so big, no, how you deal with it.
Yeah.
I guess that for all of us, it's very difficult. No?
And what bothers me is, all of the things that I said, for instance, the economic crisis, as well as the pandemic, as well as the regional wars, are not divorced from climate change. It is really the ecological collapse is the reason, or the same reasons that have led to the ecological collapse are the same reasons, the greed, the disparities and all of these. And how do people not see this?
I sometimes really, and that's something sometimes I think that we should work with this with women, because if we had women into all the panels, I'm not saying that men don't care about the children, but there is a connection which is just so, biological, no? That you just have to protect your kids, no? And
even if you don't have kids, it's somebody's children, because there's always a child you love.
And this perspective of future, no? It's just like you think on the future from a perspective of an animal.
Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes I think maybe there would be more this direction, no? Because sometimes I have this sense that men have this capacity sometimes, for good for them, to disentangle things and say, okay, what I'm doing has nothing to do with what is happening there, no?
But how do women do it? Because again, if I look at a lot of the reason, at least in India, I see a lot of senior women have not got to the stage of seniority. It's not that there were not enough of us doing our PhDs together, but for various reasons, especially the cost of motherhood to an academic career, but also the cost of just being a woman and the other responsibilities that you have, many dropped out.
Yeah.
And some dropped out because of force, but many dropped out because of choice, because they decided that they wanted to do something more at home rather than this. But now I know in your group, for instance, there's a lot of young women. And in my group, I see a lot of younger women. So what has changed? Do you think there's more opportunities for them than we had in the past?
I still think that the critical age is not when they start. Now there is a lot of women that they are studying. That's not a problem. Even doing PhDs, they are managing. The critical moment is when they start to do postdocs.
Yes.
And when they have children. There is where the drops come. Even in research, even today, there is where the impasse is there. I think lots of women may drop, once because their curriculum may not be as competitive as a curriculum for men, because they have dedicated actively more into research. But unless we rescue these women, and I'm saying rescue not in a negative way of saying they have been lost. No.
But somehow protect them.
Protect them and say, okay, we want these women to have children. I mean, these women are bloody intelligent. We don't want them to have children and to have and educate their children because they are really important people in society, no? And we need them to be there and to have mother and to have children, but we want them also to after this period somehow, which you don't need a full dedication.
No,
it's a few years. It's a few years in which you dedicate a little bit more. I would say that even I and you have been mother and we have been doing both. So
it's not easy, but
it's not easy.
But with support, you can manage.
You can manage.
With institutional support, because often they say, it's left to the family. But what if you don't have the chance of a family support? Some people don't.
I think that eventually it has to be something at the level of the society.
Yeah.
That there is a space for having children and then a space in which they recover these researchers and say, okay, we evaluate you with a very, and with a way in which we know perfectly what it means to have a family and children. I see some women doing this, and some of them have been actually managing to, but it's still very tough.
It's still tough.
Because, of course, you arrive after a maternity, and most of women will have half of the publications that an equivalent man, also with children, will have, no? And they will compete.
They will
with
compete,
each other.
which is hard.
And that's the thing, no?
Yeah.
So it's so I think that it should be this in one hand. So I think it's a genuine choice to be dedicated to your family.
Exactly, it is a genuine
choice.
Yeah, for a while. Yeah.
And but that doesn't mean that it has to occupy.
Unfortunately, we make it a binary choice.
Yeah,
you do this and then you close another gate, and we shouldn't make it like that.
No.
Yeah. But I want to switch gears a little bit now and ask you about your research now, because you said you started with seagrasses and then you saw all of these changes, and then as I understand it, that's when you got interested more in climate change as opposed to just looking at herbivory and mega herbivory. And you work on a lot of work on storms, but you also started working on fire and the impacts of fire on climate change. So can you tell me a little bit about both kinds of work, and also how you got motivated to do this?
Okay, so I guess that, as I was saying before, no, when you are studying a system, I'm extremely interested in interactions, in everything that has to do with pure ecology, no? But of course, at a certain point, you're just looking at the system, and when something so big comes through, you cannot just ignore it. So I guess that all of us just said, okay, that it's something. And of course, first we started just recording it and just trying to understand and just trying to see what happened. But in the marine systems, I think that there is an additional thing, no, with climate change. Of course, one is that you have probably similar effects of climate change, like the temperature, particularly I would say even more strong, because lots of ecosystems are really suffering. But we have an additional problem, and it's often we don't even know what we have. So we are facing a problem which is double. In one hand, you're facing a climate change, a crisis of biodiversity, and you don't know what you have. And at that point, you say, no way. I have to start to try to understand and to actually see if I can understand the system and see how it is interact with the climate change. And doing that, what I realized in particular is that for the marine systems, for the seagrasses, of course, you start with the temperature, no? Because that's the coral reefs, etc. Lots of terrestrial systems as well, but particularly marine ecosystem temperature is one of the most critical factors. And by doing monitorings and started with the temperature, what I realized is that suddenly some storms came. And there were storms, which apparently were storms which were one of this century, one storm that comes every 100 years, no? The effect of those storms was so huge on these marine ecosystems. And we were lucky of being able to record it, because these storms, they just come, they destroy the system. You don't have previous data. You don't even know that has happened. There, what we were lucky is that we could see, we went to the water after that. I managed to take I have lots of friends which are researchers. I say, go to the water, see exactly 1 week after, 2 weeks after, and see what is happening, because the leaves of the plants were still there. So they were with all the sediment on the top, and we could record. And it happened like in 15 years ago, and it has happened just 3 or 4 years ago again, another storm of these characteristics. With this last, we recorded that the area in which this storm was affecting the ecosystems, we lost almost between 20 to 30% of the habitat. This is just
in the country.
Well, in the area which will be, not the country, but we would say one important area of the Mediterranean, half of the country of the Mediterranean. So it was like, what? I mean, how we are missing this?
Yeah.
And it was just by chance. It was just because we had the opportunity to, because we could record it just after that happened.
Also because you switched to looking at climate change, because otherwise you wouldn't have.
Exactly. And because it was something that actually I was already interested. I realized that the storms could play a role. But when you have these really unusual, infrequent storms, it's very difficult to study.
Yeah.
Who is going to ask for a project with a storm that happens once every 20 years, 30 years?
And your grant is for 3 years or 5 years, and maybe there's no storm. Yeah.
Exactly. So in that case, what we were lucky somehow, or unlucky, is that the storm happened, and I was able to get a lot of samples, and then I could ask for the
money to
analyze it. And then, of course, we could do a lot of this. And what is more, and what we realize is that the storm not just destroys the ecosystem, but seagrass ecosystems are also famous, very well known to be one of the carbon storages. So they have a lot of importance as a blue carbon. Okay. What we also realize is that the storms also are very, very critical in moving all the sediments and moving all the carbon that it's actually under the plants. So it's one, not just affects the habitat and loss of habitat, but also it's a way in which the carbon
goes back into the sky.
It goes back again into the water. It could be oxidized again. It could be actually lost again. No? So it can be a carbon emission, which is very important. So from being an ecosystem, which actually traps carbon, and sequesters a lot of carbon, it becomes a carbon emission.
And when you're talking about, I'm coming back to your previous point about being, why is the world blind? I think we should turn the lens on ourselves as ecologists and say, why are ecologists blind? Because even ourselves, I look back on myself 30 years ago and think so many of the questions I was asking was basic ecology questions. And even at that time, habitat change was going on. But if you hadn't thought of asking these questions now, nobody would have known about this. And I think we need to be documenting these with our climate change lenses on, because otherwise we are also interested only in our very specific questions of scientific interest to us. And these are applied questions, but they're so relevant, right?
No, I think that absolutely. And and eventually, and having the capacity also to switch things. And saying, okay, maybe that's my field, but something happened and you think that it's important. And for instance, and I will put you an example now, before you say fires, everybody will say, why fires in the sea? Why fires in the sea? That is something I'm just right now starting. So it's not something we have actually too much of research done or data. But again, it does happen that there was a fire in the Mediterranean, particularly Mediterranean climate. Fires often happen in the coastal area. What happened is that if they can happen in the coastal area, like in California, in the Mediterranean, in Australia, all these Mediterranean climates, if you have it very close to the coast, what happens is that after that, there are rains and everything that's in the coast goes into the sea. So my interest now is to understand what is happening with this carbon, which is actually arriving to the sea. No? And again, the seagrass ecosystems, we don't know how they will be affected. There is a lot of iron in this rest in the coming from the terrestrial systems, which can be a fertilizer for the seagrass ecosystem. Right. So part of this iron can be actually compensating with more production of the plant. It potentially can also shade the plant and can be a negative factor. But one of the factors which can even be more important is that part of this carbon can be sequestrated in the seagrass meadows. So I'm actually trying to see if marine ecosystems partially can be one potential buffer of these coastal fires that we have in these systems. No? And that was completely by chance. By chance. We just happened that we had some field station in a place where this fire came.
So I think one of the things in many of my Let's Talk Climate Change conversations has always been serendipity. There's always something going on around us, and it's the people who keep their eyes and ears open to this chance. Many of us are very blinkered on because it's a disciplinary training. Ecology is a very disciplinary training.
Absolutely.
And so interdisciplinarity doesn't happen by accident. It happens. Now maybe people are teaching interdisciplinarity. In our times, there was no teaching of it. Right? It's those who keep their eyes and ears open for something that is going on. Yeah. And you did the next step also, because you're now looking at social ecological systems. For someone who is a classical ecologist who is very interested in ecological interactions, now you're looking at this. So how did that shift happen?
Well, that shift happened probably again by chance. I mean, it happened to be close to people that were very interested in socio-ecological systems. It actually happened here in India. So here in India, I think there is a much better connection between ecology and social systems, at least with the people I have been interacted, which is in NCF. And I guess that being with people who were always not seeing the ecosystem, but also trying to understand all this, particularly in fisheries, which is coral reefs and fisheries, etc., trying to understand how both systems were influencing each other. At the end, you start to think differently. So I guess that affected me also the way I started to see my ecosystem in Spain. There, I have to say one thing, it's that here in India, these connections are extremely strong. You cannot just look at a forest without understanding what is happening.
Because there are people everywhere and it's influencing everything.
People everywhere, and people are still depending on resources.
Very much
a
so.
lot associated to the ecosystem. In Europe is a much different relationship. In Europe, this type of relationship, okay, there is still fishing, but a lot of this dependence is not there anymore. So you don't have this dependence on the systems. You don't have the people living and as much dependent on the resources of the common systems or whatever. It's a much more, it's probably the dependence is another type of dependence. It's a dependence which is more associated with your emotions, with
cultural values,
with
artisanal
tourism,
fishing, tourism hugely
very
in Costa Brava.
Very important, but not as much on the resources itself. But however, except I would say with fisheries, which still there is an important part, no? But as a result of this, of this difference, sometimes at the beginning maybe I was thinking, no, it's not as relevant. No, but then you realize that it is very relevant as well. I mean, eventually all people are connected to the place where we are. And actually, I think that we are from communities, actually the Catalan community, the Spanish community where I live, it's very similar to India in many things, no? And we are people very linked to our culture and our earth and our landscapes.
Especially you have a house you can trace 800 years of family history.
Exactly.
Right? So very much connected to place.
Yeah, we are very connected to place. So if you are very connected to place, you cannot ignore the ecosystems which are there, which actually you are part of it.
Yeah.
And you are linked to it in many, many ways, even if are less tangible ways as, I don't know, what happened with the wildlife. We don't have dangerous wildlife. We don't have leopards or tigers. We go very nicely walking through everywhere without this type of relationship. But still, the relationship is a very, I would say, eventually it's the landscape. I feel connected to a particular landscape, no? And I think that is everywhere, no?
Yeah. So that brings me to, I think, one of my last questions, which is what is your hope for the future? Because you've talked about a lot of the fears for the future. Where is your optimism? And you are an optimist. So where is your optimism coming from?
Yeah, sometimes, I don't know. I have these ideas and sometimes I just think that, if I have to think on the world, I don't have optimism at all. I was yesterday watching at the news and at some point I say, okay.
I've stopped watching.
I stopped because I couldn't handle it. Everything was happening. So there I can be optimistic. But somehow, there are other places where I can get a bit of optimism. And I guess that is something also with Rohan, with other friends, we keep talking about. And is to try to see if there are ways in which they can occur some kind of shifts. And what type of shifts we are talking about? We are talking about ways, of course, one thing is that changes occur up, which is what I'm not optimistic. But I'm saying about bottom, but not at the individual level. That is something that I think that, of course, you can do changes at the individual level, but that is not what needs change because that is it's not going to succeed. No, but if we have some kind of communal changes, ways of functioning at the level of small units, let's say villages, let's say, I don't know, communities, which we actually choose to have a different type of life, no? In which, let's say, we do much more circular economy. We are less dependent on many things which are from outside. We try to reduce many of the carbon and a lot of the things which are actually, we know how this can function, no? At a small scale, but repeated in many places, no? Something which is a little bit more tangible, which actually also benefited as a better quality of life. Because eventually, all of us, what we want is to have a good quality of life, no? And that is something which I see positive. There are lots of ways of living which we can actually get, which is a much more, it's a circular life economy, much more connections, taking care of each other, no? Return a bit of a care system as well, no? Yes. And seeing if these actually have the possibility to break and actually change, going up.
And so we do see a lot of
models. Maybe people will actually want to take.
And we do see a lot of those, maybe small, but I think growing in both in Spain and in India.
Yeah.
Right. So hopefully.
Yeah. I don't know. I have now this summer I met a girl in Gandesa, in my village, that is a researcher, very good technological researcher. And we were talking precisely about these things and we were saying, let's do something. Let's try to see if we can change in a small village, see if some of these ideas can come, etc. Just a thought, no?
No, wonderful.
But I think that, that is my hope. And I see it because it's linked also to happiness. It's people doesn't like this type of life.
People don't like this. It's very dystopic, yes. Yeah. But I think coming back to something you said right at the beginning, a thread for me that runs through this is the importance of thoughtful conversations, whether with your friends that all of you picked up and went into these areas of biology and ecology, or the conversations you had with your professors, Margalef, or if you think of the conversations that you had in India, which led to social ecological systems, or this in Gandesa. I think we learn through these conversations. I've learned a lot from today's conversation. And that's the enriching that takes us forward. So
it's how it moves us eventually.
So thank you so much, Teresa. It was absolutely wonderful to have you with us.
Nice to be here as well.
Yeah.